Spider-Man. Can Spider-Man save superhero games? And I know what you're thinking. Save them? They don't need to be saved. I just played Batman Arkham Knight. Yeah, you did in 2015, and without any word of what's truly going on over at Rocksteady, or the sad situation that leaves us without another Punisher game, despite the first being amazing, or the even weirder situation over at Marvel for Netflix. A lot of those lines could have been really enjoyable titles, but we don't get any. In fact, we just have a few standouts when it comes to superhero games, though we could count mobile games. But yeah, no. Maybe the better question is this finally the right time for a Spider-Man game? A time when the computing power can finally bring us a superhero that doesn't have to be crouched in the night to be cool, but can instead be standing tall in the daytime and not feel like we're constantly making concessions. Looking back into the gaming history, superhero games, mind you the ones where you live a day in the life of kind of titles, haven't always fared so well, and in fact a large number of them have fallen directly into the arch nemesis pit of cash in, crap out that game development at times can be known for. I say day in the life of because those are wholly different from some of the other titles we get. Like Marvel Superhero Squad, which had about as much of a right of existing as the character Hindsight did, whose superhero power basically boils down to him being like an annoying little sister and telling you sucked only after you did anything. Make no mistake, we have had some good games in the market for superheroes overall. We had a large fan base that existed for the Diablo-style Marvel Heroes 2018, which took off, promptly got flooded with a bunch of different various superhero skins so that they could grift people out of their cash, released onto consoles, and then folded completely with almost no warning. The Ultimate Alliance games, which actually weren't that bad when it comes to beat-em-ups. But today we're talking about day in the life of games, which aren't as easy as many people think to develop, especially when done in the open world format that so many gamers seem to want right now. How else can we explain the almost godlike power of Amazing Spider-Man 2 to completely and utterly suck? Now, one of the reasons this has been so problematic in the past for developers is the handling of the game world around the hero and how that form and function meld together. This is something that looks like Insomniac has really nailed with the title, but let's look at another few for just a second. Take, for instance, Batman Arkham Asylum. One of the multitude of reasons the game plays well is its established scope of the asylum itself. It's a perfect backdrop for both the stealth and the bone-breaking gameplay that allows for the intersection of the two major activities that Batman's always been popular for, sneaking up on enemies and then beating the ever-living crap out of them. It's a combination of refined gameplay space with Batman's overall persona, and it hits in a way that many fans don't feel was replicated as well in the later titles, though that's up for debate, because I absolutely loved launching people into the air with a bat tank and then lied to everybody and said, oh, they're just stunned. Long line of now paralyzed enemies notwithstanding, the later Batman games expanded the scope fairly well and offered a suitable backdrop for the technology showcases that Batman's armory was, as well as focusing on up-close combat and battles, which is a staple of the Batman feel, but moving it into an open world, or at least open Gotham, and I think right there is a little bit of the crux of this. If you look at Spider-Man games, many of which have already been open world in some way, the truth is, aside from a couple gems, the titles haven't been that great. In fact, many haven't been that good at all. You can't showcase Spider-Man in the way that you can in a Batman games, and they certainly haven't done as well as Rocksteady has with their hero. Let's take a look at it from the standpoint of challenges. Spider-Man is many things that make different challenges for the developers than, say, a Batman game. He's a hero by day, unlike Batman, who seems to be able to spread nighttime anywhere he goes. Spider-Man is there out in the open, and the only real thing hidden is his identity, but not his presence, which is a major departure from Batman. Batman can limit view distance with everything from camera orientation to expert culling to weather effects to nighttime itself. In fact, the very essence of that character offers a number of technical buffers not available in an open-world Spider-Man game. One game occurs in many cramped confines, with exploration in perpetually raining, dreary, and view distance locations, as well as a fiction that presents usually some restriction on pedestrians being in high number, whether that be nighttime curfews or just the general mired in muck fiction that normal day-to-day folks in Gotham are going to have to deal with. While the Spider-Man games have to offer the same high-flying moments, but they're higher, they're faster, they're open to all the caveats a daytime graphics engine has to deal with, namely draw distance and level of detail. Add to that the fact that Spider-Man is a savior of the people, so you know what, the game should show some people, which it does all the time, flooding the world with pedestrians, so the fiction of Spider-Man swinging right above people's heads and saving them is replicated as accurately as any Batman title when it comes to the stealth and the bone-breaking gameplay. And while I've felt that none of them hit perfectly, I will say that one of the better Spider-Man games handled this challenge by splitting up the action into very unique shards. That, of course, is Shattered Dimensions, which had a unique twist on the Spider-Man take for video gamers, allowing the exploits of a number of alternate dimension Spider-Man and in a way is a bit like the later Arkham games, spreading things out some more, and while still trying to offer the acrobatic showcases of the Spider-Man, also allowed for a little bit of flexibility in the focus. But here, we also run into the next challenge between these two kinds of superheroes, and in fact, any superhero and Spider-Man, and that's animation. When you look at Batman, he's acrobatic, make no mistake, but the feeling of weight and impact always reminds you that he can take a punch or a bat to the face and he'll just grab a bullet out of the air and push it through you to prove a point, or use a variety of his gadgets to ruin your day. But there's an almost monolithically cumbersome feel to the way he moves, and that's on purpose, and it adds weight, despite him doing a backflip to then punch you in the back of the head. Spider-Man is exactly the opposite, a wiry, boned, feet barely touching the ground mutated acrobat. His combat has to facilitate a far more fluid dimension to it, and if it doesn't do that, it won't reflect the differences. Additionally, he also has gadgets, and to me, that's where past Spider-Man games haven't brought it all together, and that's in his movement combined with the other elements. One game has good web slinging, the other has good city traversal, one might have excellent rewarding combat, but is missing elements from the other games. This is something the Rocksteady titles have done in spades. But to me, it looks like Insomniac may have figured out how to do it, and some of it is due to the technology. What does that mean exactly? Well, the first issue when dealing with Spider-Man is the strange situation of knowing that you have a superhero who has the flexibility of a Cirque du Soleil acrobat, but no matter what game we played, the animation never blended incredibly well, which is a staple of this superhero. This is a hero known to swing onto the side of a building, continue running, leap off, jump across a gap, fly under a billboard, and then swing across a series of cars, all in the same 4 seconds. But in past Spider-Man titles, the lack of excellent animation blending between those activities separated each one into its own respective movement. And that is not Spider-Man. We see how Insomniac is taking care of this with some incredibly smooth animation blending, and the techniques that they use means that in almost no circumstance does it look like Spider-Man is not interacting directly with the game world around him. And unlike Batman with up-close brutal focus, Spider-Man's doing so by lending motion and momentum between all the activities. It's like an actor in a movie who can't emote well, or someone we saw on the E3 stage who doesn't know what to do with their hands because everyone's off rehearsing just to make sure that the words epic, immense, and immersive are said. But no one remembers that people talk with their hands. They blend their ideas with their hands, with every motion, lean, and gesture of their bodies. This is mimicked in storytelling. For instance, this version of Spidey has been around for about 8 years, so admittedly the days of smashing into a wall are pretty much long gone. Here, that's remedied by the continued movement system they built into the game. When you do hit a wall in the direction of your last input, it's mapped on, so you can continue moving up, down, left, or right on the wall, all transitioning using their animation blending techniques, including, for example, a slight knee bend and bobble into a forward run that happens when you swing directly into a flat surface. The second area that it seems Insomniac have really nailed is a complete understanding of the environment and how Spider-Man moves so differently than other superheroes. In Batman games, Bruce always has anchors, and in fact the world can feel very specifically set up like a very cool jungle gym, one that's a blast to traverse, but it's also set up in a way that's fairly obvious where your points of attack are going to come from. This mimics Batman's older age, more mature outlook on the situations, and desire to do the most damage while also offering enemies the terror of disappearing into the night. But in Spider-Man, it's all dynamic. He's a man that at times looks like he's made from silly putty and a bunch of crayons melted into a microwave and then injected with sentience. Because while there are obviously locations where leaping onto them or attacking or eavesdropping is sort of offered and expected, in Spider-Man you can also do that anywhere in the game, resulting in that dynamic feel of being Spider-Man. And with Spider-Man, it's always about the journey, not the destination. When those separate things come together, like animation and location spots, its fluidity and sheer feeling of being Spider-Man is heightened compared to some of the prior games. Also, Insomniac has put an incredible amount of time into their dynamic camera, allowing for far distance shots that really inspire that vertigo feeling of Spider-Man games that need to capture the feeling of being on a crashing airplane, to the up-close moments and the comedic fighting style of Spider-Man. Spider-Man's entire dynamic is moving around the world in a parkour style, and Insomniac have gone to great lengths to make sure that that all flows together. The camera also seems to be a bit farther away than some other games, which allows for the function of Spider-Man's combat type, which is more acrobatic in nature, to be done without the consistent guessing game of wondering if the enemy you just leapt over is going to swing at you. Also in the gameplay demos we've seen, it appears to be a highly intelligent camera concerning locations, especially blocking of the sweep or pan that may be occurring, so everything looks almost seamless in its presentation. Now let's talk a little bit about technology. When a game begins development, the company usually sets forward looking at a particular power target that they can reach, a PS4, Xbox, PC of a certain configuration. This is done so that they can aim for a specific level of fidelity within those restrictions. Here they're aiming for 30 FPS per second on the PS4 and the PS4 Pro, and the Pro is going to get some extra graphical prowess of some kind. But aiming for that shared frames per second allows for them to figure out the movement with variability in the frames per second, since 60 FPS would probably not be solid. Here, it's a locked 30. Line of sight, especially in cityscapes, is incredibly important, especially to a daylit and in some ways spotlight-loving character like Spider-Man, so understanding those restrictions has helped Insomniac. It's also allowed them to build in a very advanced level of detail system into the game, which you can see in all the videos. This results in a smooth introduction to any newer geometry without the dithering of farther off elements that we see in other games. It is a noticeable improvement, and once again, it adds to the fiction. The current PCs and consoles are also a far cry from the system power available to devs in the past games, Spider-Man and Batman alike, and certainly almost required in a game like this where you know you're going to be swinging across an entire city, and where pop-in is quite easily the worst enemy of something appearing seamless. In fact, just by their definition, they're the opposite. As technology's progressed, we've seen more and more inroads into games that require less caveats to get them onto our screens. It's not perfect, not by any means, and I'm sure everyone out there who owns a PC is decrying 30 FPS consoles getting this as an exclusive. But the best technical and gameplay discussions don't always occur in the echo chamber of everyone owning the very best everything, and sometimes the wonder is in how particular hardware is pushed far past where the original expectation was. And in this case, that technological showcase appears to really be allowing for another superhero to finally get the day in the sun that I think a lot of us feel that he deserves. Whether all this comes to fruition when the game ends up seeing screens and fall, no one knows. But Insomniac is a very talented team, and those design chops are actually already showing in all of the footage right now, and we still have many months to go. So anyway, that's it for me. I hope you guys liked the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. Maybe check out my Reddit or my Twitter. Maybe give me a follow. You can also become a patron on the Patreon website. If you want to jump in, discuss games like this, suggest a new kind of video, that's the place to do it. Peace out and enjoy the rest of your week.